The needle slips through the fabric with practiced ease, each stitch a tiny rebellion against the chaos swirling around me. The community center hums with excited chatter as dozens of women work on their quilts for the annual charity auction. I'm supposed to be teaching them, but right now, I can barely keep my own hands steady. Brooklyn, honey, are you feeling all right? Emma's voice cuts through my concentration. You look pale. I force a smile, though the fluorescent lights above seem to spin. I'm fine. Just need some water. That's when I hear his voice, Michael, cutting through the background noise like a knife. He's not supposed to be here. This is my sanctuary, my escape. But there he stands in his perfectly pressed suit, phone in hand, talking loudly enough for everyone to hear. No, no, you don't understand. I never loved her. It was always about maintaining appearances. The whole marriage was a facade. The room goes quiet. Every head turns. The quilt slips from my fingers as my world narrows to a pinpoint. I try to stand, but my legs won't cooperate. The floor rushes up to meet me. Someone help her! Emma calls out. But Michael just laughs. That hollow, cruel sound I've grown to hate. Classic Brooklyn, always with the dramatics. This is exactly why I couldn't stay. Everything's always about her. I'm Brooklyn, and this is the moment my life shatters into 1,000 tiny pieces, like shards of broken glass scattered across the community center floor. Through the fog of humiliation, I hear gasps and whispers. Feel hands helping me up. See concerned faces swimming in and out of focus. But all I can focus on is Michael, standing there with that smirk I once found charming. You didn't have to do this here, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Where else would I find you? You're always at these pathetic little sewing circles. He waves his hand dismissively at the half-finished quilts. Playing teacher to a bunch of housewives when you could have been something more. I tried to help you aim higher, but you never listened. Rachel, my best friend, steps between us. Get out, Michael. You've done enough damage. Damage! He laughs again. I've done her a favor. Now she can stop pretending she's happy playing small-town craftsman. Maybe she'll finally grow up. The room spins again, but this time it's not from weakness. It's rage. Pure, molten rage that burns through the shock and hurt. I grab the edge of the table, steadying myself. You want to talk about pretending? My voice comes out stronger than I expect. How about pretending to be a decent human being for the past 8 years? He steps closer, lowering his voice. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I've already arranged to sell the house. Your things will be packed and moved to your parents by Friday. You what? The words hit like physical blows. That's our house. You can't. Actually, I can. Check the paperwork, sweetheart. It's all perfectly legal. Emma appears at my side with a glass of water, but I wave it away. The room has stopped spinning. Everything is crystal clear now. This isn't over, I tell him. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. It was over long before today. I just finally had the courage to admit it. He turns to leave, then pauses. Oh, and Brooklyn? Don't bother trying to contest anything. My lawyers are better than any you could afford on a sewing teacher's salary. As he walks out, leaving stunned silence in his wake, something inside me shifts. The hurt is still there, but underneath it, something darker takes root. Something that whispers of justice and vengeance. I look around at the unfinished quilts, each one representing hours of careful planning and precise execution. Maybe it's time to apply those same skills to something besides sewing. After all, Michael always did underestimate what I could accomplish when I put my mind to it. Rachel squeezes my shoulder. What are you going to do? I pick up my fallen needle, testing its sharp point against my finger. I'm going to show him exactly what this small-town craftsman is capable of. The cardboard box feels heavier than it should as I carry it up my parents' driveway. 8 years of marriage condensed into 3 boxes. It seems impossible, yet here we are. My mother stands in the doorway, wringing her hands like she used to do when I was sick as a child. Let me help you with that, sweetheart, she says, reaching for the box. I've got it, Mom. The words come out sharper than intended. The last thing I need right now is to be treated like I'm fragile. Inside, Linda, my father, sits at the kitchen table, laptop open, fingers tapping against the wood in that familiar rhythm that means she's plotting something. She barely looks up as I set the box down. "Have you checked your bank accounts?" she asks. "Linda!" my mother warns. "She just got here. And Michael's probably already 3 steps ahead of us, Susan. We need to act fast." The mention of his name makes my stomach clench. I sink into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I tried. He's changed all the passwords. Linda's typing intensifies. "Of course he has. Classic first move. Did you know he's been meeting with Richard Carlton? The real estate agent?" My head snaps up. "How do you—" "I still have friends at the country club." She finally meets my eyes. "He's listing properties that are in both your names." The room starts to spin again, but I force myself to stay upright. "He can't do that without my signature." "He can if he forged it." Linda's voice is cold, calculating, which, given his recent behavior, wouldn't surprise me. "Stop it, both of you," my mother interrupts, setting down cups of tea none of us asked for. "Brooklyn needs rest, not revenge plots. What I need is to not be talked about like I'm not here." I stand up, knocking against the table. Tea sloshes over the rim of the cups. And what I need is for someone to tell me how my entire life imploded in less than 24 hours. The silence that follows is deafening. My mother reaches for me, but I step back. "I'll be in my old room," I mutter, heading for the stairs. "Brooklyn!" Linda calls after me. "Rachel called while you were getting your things. She's worried about you." Of course she is. Everyone's worried about me. Poor, naive Brooklyn, who couldn't see what was happening right in front of her face. I'm halfway up the stairs when I hear them start arguing. "She needs time to process," my mother insists. "What she needs is to protect herself before he takes everything," Linda counters. "You didn't see his face at that charity event, Susan. This isn't just about leaving her. He wants to destroy her." Their voices fade as I reach my childhood bedroom. Everything's exactly as I left it. Debate team trophies, old sewing projects, photos of— I rip the prom picture off the wall before I can think about it too much. My phone buzzes. Rachel. "I'm fine," I answer before she can ask. "No, you're not." Her counselor voice. "But that's okay. What's not okay is you ghosting everyone who cares about you." I sit on the edge of my bed, running my fingers over the familiar quilt pattern. "I just need— If you say time, I'm coming over there right now." She pauses. "Actually, I'm coming over anyway. Your mom called me." "Of course she did." I lie back, staring at the ceiling. "Did she tell you about the real estate agent too?" "No, but Emma did. Apparently Michael's been busy. He's already got 3 properties listed." Something inside me snaps. 3? We only own 2 properties. Rachel's silence speaks volumes. Unless— The realization hits like a punch to the gut. "He's selling my studio, isn't he? The one I inherited from Grandma?" "Brooklyn!" "I'll call you back." I hang up before she can protest, practically flying down the stairs. Linda's already pulling up property records when I reach the kitchen. "I was wondering when you'd figure it out." "He can't sell that studio. It's not even in his name." "No," Linda agrees, turning the laptop so I can see. "But 3 months ago you signed it over to him. Or at least, someone signed your name." "The forgery is good. Really good. But the signature isn't mine." My mother touches my shoulder. "Honey, maybe we should—" "Don't!" I cut her off, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Don't tell me to calm down. Don't tell me to take the high road." I look at Linda. "You still have contacts at the DA's office?" She nods, a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. "Good. Because Michael's right about one thing. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The lock to my grandmother's studio clicks open, and my heart stops. Everything's wrong. The familiar scent of fabric and creativity is gone, replaced by the sterile smell of cleaning products. The walls are bare, no inspiration boards, no vintage patterns, No photographs of 3 generations of sewists. They cleared it out yesterday. A voice startles me. I turn to find a man standing in the doorway. Tall, dark-haired, wearing paint-splattered jeans. I'm Jason. I work in the studio next door. My fingers curl into fists. Who cleared it out? Some guys in a moving truck. Had paperwork and everything? He hesitates. Your husband was supervising. The word husband burns like acid. Ex-husband. Right, sorry. Jason steps inside, hands in his pockets. They took everything except this. He reaches behind a radiator and pulls out a small wooden box. I grabbed it when they weren't looking. Seemed important. My grandmother's button box. The last thing she gave me before she died. Inside, generations of stories told through salvaged buttons, each one carefully labeled with its history. Thank you, I whisper, clutching the box. My phone buzzes. Linda. Brooklyn, where are you? The realtor's showing the studio in 20 minutes. I'm already here. My voice sounds strange, distant. It's empty. What? That's impossible. The showing isn't until... She stops. Don't move. I'm calling our lawyer. But I'm barely listening. Through the window, I can see Michael across the street, talking to a couple in business attire. He's wearing that fake smile, the one I used to think was charming. He's here, I tell Linda. With buyers. Brooklyn, don't! I end the call and stride across the street, the button box still in my hands. Jason calls after me, but I keep walking. Prime location, completely renovated, Michael's saying. The previous tenant was running some kind of craft business, but... Craft business? The box feels heavy in my hands. Is that what you're calling my grandmother's legacy? The couple looks uncomfortable. Michael's smile doesn't waver. Brooklyn, this is a private showing. Private? Like how you privately forged my signature? Or how you privately cleared out 30 years of family history? Maybe we should come back another time, the woman suggests. No need. Michael's voice hardens. My wife is just having trouble accepting reality. Ex-wife, I correct him. And reality is that you're trying to sell property you don't own. Check the paperwork. He pulls out a folder. Everything's legal. Including this? I open the button box and pull out a small envelope. Grandma's original deed, naming me as sole owner, the one you couldn't find to forge. His smile slips just for a second. The couple exchanges glances. We'll be in touch, the man says quickly, and they hurry away. Michael waits until they're gone before his facade cracks. You're making a mistake. No, your mistake was thinking I'd just roll over and let you take everything. Everything? He laughs, but it's ugly. You want to talk about taking? How about 8 years of my life, playing along with your small-town dreams when I could have been something more? You could have left any time. And walk away with nothing? He steps closer. I earned this. Every fake smile at your silly sewing circles, every mind-numbing dinner with your parents, every moment pretending your pathetic little ambitions were enough. I earned this studio. Jason appears beside me. Everything okay here? Michael's eyes narrow. Mind your own business. The studio is my business, Jason says calmly, since I'm buying it. I turn to him, startled. Michael laughs again. Nice try, but it's already sold. Actually, Jason pulls out his phone, I just got confirmation from the bank. The sale's been blocked pending investigation of fraudulent documentation. Michael's face goes white. You... Also, Jason continues, I have security footage of yesterday's moving crew. Interesting timing, clearing out a property before it's legally sold. My phone buzzes again. Linda, probably with the lawyer. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I feel steady. You should go, Michael. My voice is quiet but firm. And whatever scheme you're running, whatever you think you're entitled to, it ends now. He opens his mouth, closes it. For a moment, I see something flicker in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Then he turns and walks away, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement. Thank you, I tell Jason, for the button box, and don't thank me yet. He hands me a business card. I think we need to talk about what else your ex-husband's been up to, and I'm pretty sure you'll want to hear this. Jason's revelations about Michael sit like stones in my stomach as I drive to Rachel's office. The familiar counseling services sign offers no comfort today. Through the window, I can see her with a client, the same steady, compassionate presence she's always been. I check my phone again. 3 missed calls from Linda, 2 from Susan, a text from Emma about tomorrow's sewing class, and 1 email from Michael's lawyer, probably another threat wrapped in legal jargon. Rachel opens her door, ushering out her client. When she sees me, her professional smile falters. "You look like hell." "Thanks." I follow her inside, sinking into the worn leather chair. "Did you know Michael's been monitoring my bank accounts?" She closes the door carefully. "How did you find out?" "Jason showed me the evidence. Michael's been tracking every transaction since before we separated. He knew exactly when to move against the studio because he was watching my finances." Rachel sits down, her counselor mask slipping. "Brooklyn, don't." I hold up a hand. "Don't tell me to take the high road. He's been planning this for months, maybe years." "That's not what I was going to say." She leans forward. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." My chest tightens. "What?" "Michael came to see me, professionally, 6 months ago." The words hang in the air like smoke. I stand up, my legs unsteady. "You're his therapist?" "Was. For 3 sessions." She won't meet my eyes. "I terminated the relationship when I realized who he was." 3 sessions. I laugh, but it sounds wrong. "While you were helping me plan my future, you were counseling my husband?" "Ex-husband," she corrects softly. "And I couldn't tell you. Ethics." "Ethics." The word tastes bitter. "He's destroying everything I care about, and you're worried about ethics." "Brooklyn, sit down, please." She waits until I do. "There's more." During those sessions, Michael talked about things, plans. I couldn't say anything directly, but I tried to warn you. Memory hits like a slap. All those careful questions about financial independence, the suggestions to document everything, the urgent recommendations to change my passwords. "You knew." My voice sounds distant. "You knew what he was going to do." "I suspected, but I couldn't." "Break confidentiality." "Right." I stand again, steadier this time. "Funny how everyone who claims to care about me keeps having very good reasons for letting Michael win." "That's not fair." "No?" I move to the door. What's not fair is finding out my best friend chose professional ethics over warning me that my life was about to implode. "Where are you going?" "To do what I should have done from the start." My hand tightens on the doorknob. Stop trusting people who say they're protecting me and start protecting myself. "Brooklyn, wait!" She grabs my arm. "Whatever you're thinking about doing, remember who you are." I look at her hand, then her face. "That's the problem, Rachel. Everyone seems to think they know exactly who I am. The nice girl, the understanding wife, the forgiving friend." I pull away. "Maybe it's time to show them how wrong they are." "Don't let him turn you into something you're not." "Too late." I open the door. "He already did that. Now I'm just deciding what I want to become instead." Outside, my phone buzzes again. "Linda." This time I answer. "Jason just called me," she says without preamble. "We need to talk about what he found." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I start my car. "And Linda, bring every file you have from when you worked with Michael's company. Every contract, every memo, everything." "Brooklyn, it's time to stop playing defense." I pull out of the parking lot, not looking back at Rachel's office. "Michael wants to destroy what I care about? Fine. Let's see how he likes having everything he values stripped away too." The sun is setting as I drive, casting long shadows across the road. Somewhere in the distance, storm clouds are gathering. Perfect weather for what's coming. Because Michael was right about one thing. I have been playing small, following rules, trying to be nice. But now? Now I'm ready to show him exactly what happens when you back someone into a corner and expect them to break. Time to start weaving a different kind of pattern, one stitch at a time. Linda spreads the files across her dining room table like she's dealing cards for a high-stakes game. Each document represents another piece of Michael's carefully constructed facade, and with every page I turn, my anger burns colder, more focused. "He didn't just monitor your accounts," Linda says, tapping a spreadsheet. "He was systematically moving money through shell companies for months." I pick up another document, recognizing Michael's signature. "Using my studio as collateral." On the house. Jason leans against the doorframe, arms crossed. But that's not the interesting part. "What is?" He pulls out his phone, showing me an email chain. "These companies? They all trace back to Richard Carlton." "The real estate agent?" My hands clench around the paper I'm holding. "He's been working with Michael this whole time?" "Better." Jason's smile is sharp. "He's Michael's silent partner in a development project. They're buying up properties all over town, including your grandmother's building." The pieces click together like a perfect seam. "They're planning to demolish the historic district." Linda's typing furiously on her laptop. "That would destroy half the local businesses." "Including Emma's shop." My voice sounds strange, even to me. "And the community center." "Brooklyn." Susan appears in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Your sewing class is starting in 20 minutes." I'd forgotten. Tuesday night beginners class, where I teach people how to create something beautiful from scattered pieces. The irony isn't lost on me. "Cancel it," Linda suggests, not looking up from her screen. "No." I gather my things, an idea taking shape. "That's exactly where I need to be." Jason raises an eyebrow. "You're going to teach a sewing class now?" "I'm going to start pulling threads." I check my phone. 3 messages from Emma about tonight's attendance. Most of my students are connected to the historic district somehow, and they all love to talk. Understanding dawns on Linda's face. "Information gathering." "More than that." I shoulder my bag. "Michael and Richard think they're so clever, buying up properties in secret. But they forgot something important." "What's that?" In a small town, reputation is everything." I head for the door, then pause. "Mom, can you call Rachel? Tell her I need her to stop by the class tonight." "After what she did?" Susan frowns. "Because of what she did." My smile feels dangerous. "She wants to make things right. This is her chance." The community center is buzzing when I arrive. Emma meets me at the door, talking fast about missing supplies and changed schedules, but I barely hear her. I'm watching the women setting up their machines, sharing gossip and laughs, completely unaware that their businesses, their community, is about to be bulldozed. "Ladies!" I call out, and the room quiets. "Change of plans tonight. Instead of starting that quilt pattern, I want to tell you a story about greed and betrayal, and 2 men who think they can destroy our town without anyone noticing." Rachel slips in the back door as I begin speaking. Her counselor mask is gone, replaced by something harder, more determined. She catches my eye and nods once. Message received. By the time I finish talking, the room is silent except for the hum of tension. These women, shop owners, mothers, pillars of the community, they understand exactly what's at stake. "What can we do?" Emma asks, her voice tight. I pull out my phone, showing them the evidence Jason gathered. We start spreading the truth, carefully, strategically, one conversation at a time. "Like stitches in a quilt," someone says. Exactly." I look around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. "Michael thinks he can erase us because we're just small-town craftspeople. Richard believes we'll roll over and sell because we don't understand real business." Rachel steps forward. "They don't know what's coming, do they?" "No." I start distributing copies of the documents. They don't. As the women begin planning, their voices rising with purpose and anger, I feel something shift inside me. This isn't just about my revenge anymore. It's about protecting something bigger than myself. My phone buzzes. A text from Michael. We need to talk. Dinner tomorrow? I type back one word. Yes. Because sometimes the best way to destroy someone is to let them think they're winning, one careful stitch at a time, until the pattern is complete and it's too late for them to see what you've been weaving all along. The annual town hall meeting buzzes with nervous energy. Every seat is filled, and I can feel the weight of expectant gazes as I clutch my folder of evidence. Michael stands at the podium, his practiced smile never wavering as he presents the Downtown Revitalization Project. Progress requires change, he's saying, gesturing to Richard's sleek architectural renderings. Our historic district has charm, but it's holding us back from real economic growth. Linda squeezes my hand. Now, she whispers. I stand, my legs steadier than I expected. I have some questions about this project. Michael's smile tightens almost imperceptibly. Of course, Brooklyn, always supporting local interests. Actually, I'm more interested in these. I start distributing copies of documents. Bank statements showing systematic fraud, forged signatures, shell companies used to hide property acquisitions. The room erupts in murmurs. Michael's face hardens as he flips through the papers. These are confidential business documents, he says smoothly. Obtained illegally, I might add. Nothing illegal about following a paper trail of fraud, Jason calls from the back. But Michael's smiling again, and something in his expression makes my stomach drop. Speaking of paper trails, he says, pulling out his phone, I have some interesting documents of my own. Emails, actually, between Brooklyn and various community members, planning to deliberately sabotage a legitimate business venture. The room goes quiet. I feel the shift in the air as people start looking at their copies of my evidence differently. That's not, I start, but he cuts me off. Conspiracy, defamation, tortious interference. He lists them like he's reading a shopping list, all documented in black and white. Your grandmother taught you to sew, Brooklyn, but I taught you how to keep records. Rachel stands up. Those emails were private conversations. Between my therapy client and other community members, Michael interrupts, which makes them privileged information that you illegally shared, Rachel. Interesting ethical position for a counselor. The room erupts again, but this time the voices are angry, confused, accusatory. I see Emma shrinking in her seat, other business owners avoiding my eyes. This isn't about emails, I say, fighting to keep my voice steady. It's about protecting our community. From what? Richard Carlton steps forward. From investment? Growth? Or just from your ex-husband moving on? You forged my signature, I snap. Prove it. Michael's voice is gentle, reasonable. Without using illegally obtained documents or privileged communications, prove any of it. The silence that follows is deafening. I look around the room, seeing doubt creep across faces that minutes ago were supportive. Linda starts to stand, but Michael's next words freeze her in place. Oh, and Linda, the board of directors would love to discuss how you accessed corporate files after your retirement. Tomorrow morning, perhaps? My carefully woven plan unravels thread by thread. Every ally I counted on is compromised, every piece of evidence tainted. Michael has turned my own tactics against me, making me look like exactly what he accused me of being. Small, bitter, vindictive. This meeting is adjourned, the mayor announces, looking uncomfortable. Pending legal review of all materials presented. People file out quickly, avoiding eye contact. Rachel touches my shoulder as she passes, but doesn't speak. Even Jason slips away, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry about this, Michael says quietly, gathering his things. But you forced my hand. Again. How long? My voice sounds hollow. How long were you planning this? Since the day you chose that studio over the job offer I arranged in the city. He straightens his tie. Small towns breed small minds, Brooklyn. I tried to help you think bigger. By destroying everything I care about? By showing you what real power looks like. He steps closer, his voice for my ears only. Did you really think your little sewing circle could outmaneuver me? That your community would choose you over progress? I stand there, surrounded by scattered papers and abandoned chairs, watching everything I thought I knew about strength and justice crumble around me. The historic district, my grandmother's legacy, my own reputation, all hanging by threads I can't seem to gather. The demolition starts next week, Michael says from the doorway. You might want to find a new hobby. I hear knitting is therapeutic. The door closes behind him, leaving me alone with the echoes of my failed revenge and one haunting question. What happens when the weapon you choose to fight with becomes the very thing that destroys you? The demolition crew arrives at dawn. I watch from across the street as they set up barriers around my grandmother's studio, their yellow vests bright against the gray morning. Michael stands with Richard, checking something on a tablet, looking more exhausted than triumphant. I grip my coffee cup tighter, remembering Rachel's last text. He's been in therapy for months. Severe anxiety disorder. It might explain things. The cup trembles. I set it down. A small crowd gathers as the crew starts removing windows. Emma appears beside me, then Linda, then others from my sewing class. No one speaks. We just watch as they strip away decades of memories, piece by piece. Quite a turnout, Michael says, suddenly behind me. Come to witness progress? I turn. The shadows under his eyes are deeper than yesterday, his usual polish cracking at the edges. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? About the anxiety, the therapy. His face hardens. Rachel had no right. No, she didn't. Just like you had no right to forge my signature or steal my inheritance. I didn't steal anything. His voice rises slightly. I saved you from yourself, from this. He gestures at the building. This obsession with living small. A crash makes us both jump. The first wall starts coming down. You know what's funny? I keep my voice steady. I actually thought I was the weak one. That you were somehow stronger, smarter, better at life than me? Brooklyn. But strong people don't need to destroy others to feel powerful, do they? His laugh sounds hollow. Says the woman who tried to destroy me at the town hall? No. I step closer. I tried to expose the truth. You're the one who made it about destruction. Another crash. More of the wall crumbles. The truth? He runs a hand through his disheveled hair. The truth is, I couldn't breathe in this town. Every day watching you play house with your little sewing circles, pretending it was enough. It was enough for me. It was killing me. The words explode from him. The crowd stirs, watching. The panic attack started 3 years ago. Every morning, waking up knowing I'd waste another day in this cage you called home. The demolition pauses. Even the workers are watching now. You could have talked to me, I say softly. Like you talked to me? Before turning our private life into community gossip? That's different. Is it? His voice cracks. You wanted revenge because I hurt you. I wanted freedom because this place was suffocating me. Tell me, Brooklyn, which of us is really the villain here? The question hangs in the air like dust from the demolition. I look at the half-destroyed studio, then at the crowd. Linda's fierce protectiveness, Emma's quiet strength, even Rachel's complicated loyalty. All the threads that make up a life I chose, not settled for. Neither of us, I finally say. Or maybe both of us. But this? I gesture at the demolition. This isn't freedom, Michael. It's just another cage you're building for yourself. He stares at me for a long moment. Something shifts in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or resignation. Stop the demolition, he calls out suddenly. Richard steps forward. Michael, the permits! I said stop. His composure cracks completely. All of it. The development, the sales, everything. I can't do this anymore. The workers power down their equipment. The silence feels deafening. It won't fix anything, I tell him quietly. No. He looks at me with eyes I barely recognize. Vulnerable, almost afraid. But maybe that's not the point anymore. As the crowd disperses and the workers pack up, I stand in front of my grandmother's damaged studio. The wall can be rebuilt, but some things, trust, innocence, simple certainties, will stay broken. Michael pauses before leaving. I really did love you, you know. just not enough to become small. And I loved you, I reply, just not enough to become something I'm not. He nods once and walks away. I watch him go, feeling neither victory nor defeat, just the weight of understanding that sometimes the greatest act of revenge is choosing not to take it at all. Behind me, Emma touches my shoulder. What now? I look at the studio, its broken wall like an open wound, but also like a window to something new. Now, I say, we rebuild, but differently this time. The renovated studio smells of fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight streams through new windows, catching dust motes that dance like scattered memories. I run my hand along the workbench my grandmother installed decades ago, the only piece we managed to save from the demolition. The contractor says we can open next week, Emma says, setting down a box of supplies, though I still think Phoenix Studio is a bit on the nose. Sometimes obvious is good. I straighten a framed photograph. The original studio on opening day. 3 generations of women standing proud. Speaking of obvious, have you seen Jason lately? Emma's expression tightens. Not since he tried to buy the building out from under us. Funny how he disappeared once his development plans fell through. Not funny, strategic. I check my phone. Another missed call from Rachel. Some people are only interested in broken things they can profit from. The bell above the door chimes. Linda enters, carrying familiar papers. The final transfer documents, she says, laying them on the workbench. Once you sign, the studio's officially yours again. No partners, no strings. I pick up the pen, then pause. Have you heard from Michael? He's in Seattle. Linda's voice is carefully neutral. Started therapy again, apparently. The pen feels heavy in my hand. I think about Michael's last words about becoming small, about the way revenge can shrink your world even when you think you're fighting to expand it. Brooklyn? Emma touches my arm. The afternoon class is waiting. I look through the interior window to the classroom space. Women of all ages are setting up their machines, chatting, sharing stories. Not just a sewing circle anymore, but a business incubator program. My grandmother's legacy reimagined. 1 minute, I tell her. I sign the papers quickly, then reach for my grandmother's button box. Inside, nestled among generations of salvaged buttons, lies a small key. What's that for? Linda asks. The future. I hand her the box. Would you add these to the memory wall? All except this one. I hold up a pearl button, slightly cracked but still beautiful. This one goes back to its owner. The afternoon sun is warm as I walk the familiar path to Rachel's office. She opens the door before I knock, surprise flickering across her face. I was just about to call again, she says. I know. I hold out the button. Remember this? From your wedding dress fitting? She takes it, recognition softening her features. The one that popped off. You said you'd fix it, but then everything fell apart. I step back. Some things can't be fixed, Rachel, but they can be remembered, honored, and then let go. Understanding passes between us, years of friendship distilled into a single moment. The studio reopening, she says. Should I? Come, don't come. It's your choice. I turn to leave. Just like it's my choice to stop letting broken things define me. Back at the studio, the class is in full swing. Emma's teaching a new technique, her voice confident and clear. Linda and Susan sit in the back, working on a joint project for the first time in years. The memory wall gleams with buttons and photographs, each one a story of something lost or found or transformed. I take my place at the front workbench, the same spot where my grandmother taught me that every torn seam is an opportunity to create something stronger. The students look up expectantly, machines humming, threads ready. Today, I tell them, we're going to learn about reconstruction, about taking something damaged and making it not just whole again, but different. Better. A new student raises her hand. What if we make a mistake? I think about Michael, about Jason, about all the tangled threads of revenge and redemption that led me here. About how sometimes the strongest patterns emerge from unexpected breaks in the design. In sewing, like in life, I say, threading my needle, there are no mistakes, only alterations that show us who we really are. The late afternoon light catches the memory wall, making the buttons shimmer like stars, each one a small, imperfect circle, like the path I took to get here, like the journey from vengeance to understanding, like the endless cycle of breaking and mending that makes up a life. I begin to sew, adding my own stitch to the endless pattern.
I was in labor during a visit to the cemetery when my husband coldly said, "Why don't you just give birth here?" He then forcibly took my cell phone and drove away in the car. The temperature that day was over 105 degrees Fahrenheit. I was left stranded in a remote graveyard with no way to call for help, pushed to the brink of despair. I couldn't understand why my husband would do such a terrible thing. As I was overwhelmed by pain and fear, I suddenly realized something. My name is Taylor. I'm a 33-year-old housewife. We're in our third year of marriage, but early on, I had envisioned a hopeful future with my husband, Niall. On weekends, we used to go shopping together, cook, watch movies, and spend peaceful time together. I felt genuine love and trust for my husband, believing that our vowed love would last forever. However, that illusion was shattered when I became pregnant. For some reason, my husband, who had been affectionate before, suddenly turned cold. He started helping less with housework, and when I tried to talk to him, Niall would coldly say, "I'm tired from work, don't talk to me." I was confused by his attitude, and my anxiety grew day by day. When I asked him why, he shouted, "Pregnancy isn't an illness. Don't be lazy and do things properly by yourself." Since then, he stopped caring about my health or feelings entirely. Even so, I tried to mend our relationship. I thought maybe it was because he said he was tired from work. Or perhaps he was just overwhelmed by the sudden reality of becoming a father. Believing this, I made an effort to prepare meals every day and do as much housework as possible, even when morning sickness was severe. But every time I saw Niall's irritated glare, I felt the image of his former kind self slipping further away. As these days continued, the baby in my belly grew steadily, and that was my only support. "We'll meet soon. I love you so much," I would always say, caressing my growing belly. But even when I gradually started preparing baby items, my husband would still click his tongue in disapproval, and sometimes I'd even find them thrown in the trash. For the sake of the baby, I felt I had to avoid divorce at all costs. While part of me wanted to believe that Niall's attitude would change once he saw the baby's face, he started throwing things at me if I defied him even slightly. Seeing him like that, I gradually became unable to resist. As I entered the final month of pregnancy and my due date approached, one day Niall suddenly said in a commanding tone, "We're going to visit the graves now," and started getting ready. "I feel like my stomach has been tightening since this morning, so I'd like to rest at home," I said. "Can't you even go to visit graves? Or are you saying you're not interested in my family's graves?" he retorted. "That's not it at all. I didn't mean that," I said. Feeling scared by Niall's sharp glare, I couldn't speak up any more forcefully. Unable to defy my husband's orders, I had no choice but to do as he said. So we headed to the remote cemetery in Niall's car in the scorching heat. An awkward silence filled the car, with only the music from the radio echoing emptily. "All right, we're here." "Get moving," he said. Dragging my heavy body, we headed towards his family's grave. However, my body was already exhausted, sweat pouring from every pore, and I felt short of breath. The temperature that day was over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and even the mountains, which should have been cool, were stifling and suffocating. If I could just get through this quickly, we could go home. That's when it happened. Ouch! I had felt pain in my stomach even in the car, but now a sharp pain like nothing before shot through me. Surprised by the pain, I crouched down on the spot. Niall must have heard my voice, but he kept walking ahead without paying any attention. I tried to call out to stop him, but only a faint voice came out of my mouth. "Niall, please. My stomach hurts. I think I'm in labor." I expected my husband to help me when I said that, but he just stopped and looked at me with a cold face. His eyes showed no trace of love or concern for me. "Please. Take me to the hospital right now." "Why don't you just give birth here?" he said with a smirk, looking down on me. My heart sank to the depths of despair. What? This baby is his child too. I never imagined my husband would act so cruelly. "I have things to do after this, so figure it out yourself," he said, forcibly taking my cell phone from my bag. "Wait a minute. What are you going to do with that?" I asked. "It's punishment for using pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework. Reflect on it a bit," he said, smiling faintly as he put my phone in his pocket and got into the car. "Please, wait. Don't go." My desperate cries echoed through the mountains as my husband drove away. I was left on the brink of despair, with no way to call for help. As heat haze rose and the sound of insects pierced my ears, I tried to seek help somehow, but my body reached its limit and I lost consciousness. 6 hours later, suddenly a phone rang. "What's this? You secretly bought a new phone without telling me." My husband's angry shouts echoed through the hospital room. "So, did you give birth? This is the police. Your wife has passed away." Caught off guard by the unexpected person answering the phone, Niall lost his earlier bravado and could only stammer a response. "Please come to the hospital immediately." A few minutes later, footsteps approached rapidly down the hallway, and my husband burst into the hospital room. "Are you the husband? Who are you? Are you with the police?" Niall looked suspiciously at the woman in the room, who was in casual clothes. "I'm your wife's friend, Jennifer. I received a call from Taylor asking for help, so I went to the mountain cemetery," she explained the situation to Niall. "I rushed her to the hospital, but unfortunately, we were too late." Jennifer lowered her eyes sadly and bowed deeply in apology. Behind her, on the bed, lay a figure with a white cloth covering their face. Why was my wife, who was in her final month of pregnancy, alone in such a place? I don't know. I couldn't ask her about it. This can't be. What about the baby? I'm afraid the child also. Niall started sniffling, then began to cry, saying in an anguished voice, "I can't believe Taylor is gone." "Are you sure you have no idea why Taylor was at the cemetery?" Jennifer slowly raised her face and asked him with a solemn expression. "Of course not. I wasn't told anything," he replied. "I see. Then, please look at Taylor's face." The moment she gently removed the white cloth from my face on the bed, I could tell my husband gasped. After staring with wide eyes, frozen like ice for a while, Niall finally managed to squeeze out a voice. No wonder, I was staring at him with my eyes wide open. "You're alive." "Yes, I am. Thanks to you, the baby was born safely and is doing well." Actually, before losing consciousness, I realized that the phone my husband had taken from me was an old one, so I had called my best friend Jennifer for help. Then I safely gave birth to a baby boy at the hospital. Just as I felt relieved to be saved, anger and sadness over my husband's actions were swirling violently in my chest. So I decided to cooperate with Jennifer. But the police answered the phone earlier. That was Jennifer. "We set it all up to trap you after you abandoned me in the mountains." My husband's face twitched for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "I didn't do anything like that. Taylor must just be confused," he said, turning to Jennifer with a smile. "I would never do such a thing. I was worried about my wife in her final month and was looking for her." "How can you lie so shamelessly?" I said. "Taylor, you've been through a lot. But I'm so glad you and the baby are safe," Niall said, now taking my hand and acting like a good husband. I shook his hand off with all my might. "That's enough. More importantly, there's someone I want you to meet." At that moment, the hospital room door opened again, and a woman entered. "Belle." Niall's expression froze instantly, his eyelids twitching with a mixture of surprise and fear. In contrast, the woman called Belle smiled at him with composure. "I didn't come here to see you," she said. "Huh? What do you mean?" he asked. "I came to see my sister and her friend Taylor." That statement changed the atmosphere in the room completely. "You were cheating on me with Belle, weren't you? When I showed your photo to Jennifer, she said you looked like her sister's boyfriend, so I asked her to call her here." Jennifer, who had been living abroad until recently, didn't know Niall's face well. So when I showed her the photo again, we were surprised by this unexpected development. "There's no such evidence." As Niall looked around nervously, trying to cover it up somehow, I thrust Jennifer's phone in front of him. "Are you still going to deny it after seeing this photo?" It was a lovey-dovey photo of Belle and Niall, and what's more, he wasn't wearing his wedding ring in it. "I was shocked when I heard the story from my sister," Belle said. "If I had known you were married, I would never have dated you. It's the worst to make me your affair partner, so I decided to cooperate with your wife." Belle, who was also a victim like me, clearly expressed her feelings with tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm surprised. To think that the affair partner was my best friend's sister." "No. It's not like that. Taylor, you're the only one I love," Niall said, panicking at my accusation. But Belle wasn't going to stay silent either. I'll never forgive you for deceiving me. Belle took out her phone and pressed play. What came out was my husband's voice saying, "Belle, I love you. Let's get married." What the hell is this? Why did you record something like that? Niall clenched his fists and his lips trembled. Belle glared at him hatefully. As soon as I heard from my sister, I contacted you to confirm if it was true. Then she played the rest of the recorded audio. It was Niall, getting carried away, saying terrible things like, "My wife will be gone soon," and "I left my wife in the mountains." I plan to treat it as a missing person case. My husband turned pale and started shaking violently. "Too bad your plan to kill me failed," I said. "All of you are making a fool of me," he shouted, trying to forcibly take Belle's smartphone, but she smoothly dodged him. "You always think you can just take things from others and everything will work out, don't you?" she said. "This is all nonsense. I've never met this woman before. It must all be made up." My husband yelled, losing his temper despite being in a hospital room. Hospital staff were peeking in from the hallway, but he was too excited to notice. "So in your mind, it's all lies. The affair, the recording, abandoning me in the mountains." "Shut up. You be quiet." Having his pride deeply wounded by being trapped by me, whom he had looked down on, he seemed to have lost his reason. Audio can be easily fabricated. There's no way that could be evidence. Do you think the dashcam footage isn't evidence either? The moment he heard my statement, Niall froze, his mouth hanging open as he took time to understand the meaning. The car. The dashcam should have recorded everything perfectly. Niall hurriedly turned towards the door, trying to run to the parking lot to hide the evidence, but Belle quickly tripped him, causing him to sprawl ungracefully on the floor. "We've already extracted the data," I said. Realizing it was hopeless, my husband turned back to us. "The recording earlier was a lie," I told to reassure Belle. "I was really planning to go pick you up right away. Please, believe me." He prostrated himself, but there was no way I could believe him now. "You didn't contact me for 6 hours. Why did you do this?" Then, cornered, Niall started crying profusely. "Because I wanted to be free. Having a child just costs money, right? And you started slacking off on housework." Like a small child throwing a tantrum, he kept making excuses while pounding the floor. "I was just playing around a bit with Belle. I never seriously intended to marry her. If I got divorced, it would be gossiped about at work and affect my promotion, right?" I thoroughly despised my husband, realizing he was a man who only thought about himself. "Please, let's start over," he said, still clinging to me even at this point. Does he think he'll be forgiven just by apologizing? "It's too late," I answered quietly in a low voice. Niall looked utterly surprised, his face showing an expression of despair. "No way." Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a hospital security guard entered the room. The staff must have called them because of my husband's commotion. "Please, this is just a marital dispute, there's an explanation for this." My husband desperately resisted, but he was dragged out by the large security guard. As silence once again enveloped the hospital room, I unconsciously shed tears of relief, and Jennifer gently rubbed my back. Thus, I was liberated from my past suffering and decided to walk a new path in life. A few months later, my divorce from Niall was finalized. Thanks to the evidence, I was able to stand in an overwhelmingly advantageous position in court. Niall, who received a guilty verdict, is now atoning for his crimes while paying us $30,000 in compensation and child support. With the help of Jennifer and Belle, my son and I are gradually regaining our happy days. My son is growing up healthy, and smiles have returned to our lives. Through this experience, I've decided never to sacrifice myself again, no matter what difficulties may come. Life is full of unpredictable events. Even so, I will carve out my future with my own strength, without entrusting my life to anyone else. Mom, please help me. My daughter, who had just gotten married 3 months ago, suddenly showed up at my doorstep in the middle of the night. What on earth happened? When I saw her, her face was swollen and covered in bruises. I was speechless at the sight of my daughter's changed appearance. Then, as I listened to her story, I trembled with anger. This is unforgivable. Was his promise to make her happy all a lie? And I vowed to get revenge on those people who had done this to my precious daughter. I'm Susanna, 50 years old. I divorced when my daughter Leighton was still young and raised her while working full-time. Although Leighton is a reserved type, she has a strong heart and is a hard worker. Through her persistent efforts, she managed to get a job at the company she had always dreamed of. Leighton's presence has been my motivation, helping me move forward even in difficult times. So when she told me, "There's someone I want you to meet," my heart fluttered with joy. The person Leighton introduced me to was a man named Carter, who worked at one of their client companies and was 7 years older than my daughter. He looked dashing in his suit and greeted me cheerfully. He seemed serious and sincere at first glance. "I've come today to ask for your blessing for Leighton and me to get married." However, barely after introducing himself, he suddenly came out with such a statement. Leighton was only 23 at the time, and she had only been dating Carter for about 6 months. I had expected to just meet her boyfriend, so I was honestly taken aback. "Well, you're both still young. Don't you think it's a bit early to be thinking about the future?" I gently tried to discourage them, but he straightened his posture and looked me straight in the eye. "I can't think of anyone but Leighton anymore. I believe I'll never meet another wonderful woman like her." He pleaded with a serious expression, telling me how much he cared for my daughter. "Carter, I feel the same way. Mom, please. Give us your blessing for our marriage. If you two have already made up your minds, then I'll support you." Moved by his passionate feelings and hearing Leighton's plea, I gave my consent for them to be together. "Thank you so much. I promise I'll make Leighton happy." As I watched my daughter and him gazing at each other happily, I couldn't help but smile too. However, after Carter left, I couldn't fully rejoice in their marriage, and an uneasy feeling started to well up inside me. Is this really okay? Isn't it too soon? But I've heard that all parents have mixed feelings when their children get married. To be honest, I had thought my daughter's marriage was still far off, so I probably just wasn't mentally prepared. They looked so happy together. It'll be fine. After that, we met Carter's parents, and things progressed smoothly towards the wedding. They were both only children. Carter's parents, who had always wanted a daughter, seemed to really like Leighton. "Mom, I'm thinking of living with Carter's parents after we get married. While it's nice that they're fond of her, it seems they've suggested living together. Are you sure about this? I don't have experience, but I've heard that living with in-laws can be challenging. I get along well with his parents, and with Carter there, I'm not worried." "Well, I'm sure you can handle it." I thought that she, being sincere and always loved by her elders, would surely manage. Besides, his family home was only a 20-minute drive from my house, so I felt reassured that I could rush over if anything happened. And so, after the wedding ceremony was over, my daughter's new life in her in-laws' home began. I thought Leighton must be eagerly working hard, but about a month after she moved in, changes started to occur. The daily messages from Leighton stopped coming, and even when I sent her messages, I rarely got a reply. I didn't want to interfere too much, but I was concerned, so I decided to call her cell phone. "Mother-in-law, what's the matter?" To my surprise, it was Carter who answered the phone. "Could I speak to Leighton?" "She's in the bath right now." "Don't worry, she's doing fine." His tone was soft but somehow left no room for argument, and I ended up hanging up without hearing my daughter's voice. After that, there were still no messages or calls from Leighton. I decided to go and see her in person. Carter's mother had told me to come visit anytime, so I went to Carter's family home on the weekend. Carter's mother responded through the intercom, curtly telling me that Leighton was out with Carter. "I'm sorry for coming suddenly. Do you know what time they'll be back?" When I asked this, all I got in response was a big sigh. "You should call before coming. I don't know when they'll be back." Feeling that she had a point, I couldn't say anything more and had to leave Carter's house. I wondered if I was worrying too much, but it felt like Carter and his mother's attitudes had changed from before the wedding, and I couldn't shake off this bad feeling. After much deliberation, thinking I'd feel better if I could at least hear her cheerful voice, I called Leighton's workplace. To my shock, I was told that she had already resigned. Moreover, they said, "We're in trouble because she quit so suddenly." There's no way Leighton would quit her job like that. When she received the job offer from her dream company, we cried tears of joy together. Besides, Leighton was excited about balancing work and housework, so it didn't make sense for her to suddenly resign. Something is definitely wrong. But what should I do? Even if I visited Carter's house again, I wasn't sure if they'd let me see Leighton, and while I was debating whether to contact the police, the incident occurred. It was 2 days after I learned about my daughter's resignation, in the middle of the night. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. What? Who could it be at 2 a.m.? Suspiciously, I peeked at the intercom screen. It was dark and I couldn't see clearly, but from the figure, it looked like Leighton. I ran to the entrance and hurriedly opened the door. What happened? I've been so worried because I couldn't contact you. Mom. I'm sorry. My joy at seeing my daughter was short-lived. The next moment, I was shocked and lost for words. Leighton's face was unrecognizable, swollen and covered in bruises. What on earth happened to you? You're in such a state. For a while, my daughter trembled and cried, and I just rubbed her back without saying anything, trying to calm her down. Leighton began to speak haltingly, her voice choked with emotion. As I listened, it became clear that immediately after the wedding, Carter's attitude had changed completely. He said, "You've come here as a wife, so you should serve us," and treated her like a slave. And this terrible state she was in was the work of Carter and his parents. I had suspected as much when Leighton came running to my house, but as I heard the details, I trembled with anger. I didn't want to trouble you, but I'm sorry. Seeing my daughter cry like this, I felt a desire for revenge against them well up inside me. I want to make them suffer the torments of hell. I vowed in my heart never to forgive Carter and his parents who had promised to definitely make her happy, but had hurt my daughter so much. For now, I let Leighton rest and decided to confront Carter's family once daylight broke. The next morning, we first went to the hospital to have her injuries treated, and then I drove with my daughter to their house. As expected, they were in an uproar, having noticed Leighton's absence. "So you took her after all?" Carter's father shouted angrily when he realized it was me at the intercom. "Can you explain why Leighton is in this condition?" I asked sternly, unfazed by his response. Next to me stood my daughter, her cheeks still swollen, with bandages on her wounds, looking pitiful. Seeing this, they seemed to become conscious of the neighbor's eyes and let us into the house. The three of them appeared to falter for a moment, but soon showed their true colors. Carter's mother glared at Leighton and said with a sneer, "We were just disciplining her a bit because she wasn't working properly." "What are you saying?" "And Carter, didn't you declare that you would make my daughter happy?" "Well, that was on the condition that she fulfilled her role as a wife properly. But she was too preoccupied with her job. That's why I submitted her resignation letter for her." Leighton hadn't quit her job voluntarily. Carter had submitted her resignation without her knowledge. She tearfully explained that by the time she realized, it was too late. Apparently, the reason was that Carter didn't like that Leighton's work had become busy and she was coming home later than him. Leighton was working hard because she was happy to be employed at her dream company. "That's not my concern. If she can't balance both, she has to quit." Carter spoke as if he had done nothing wrong. "He's right. The other day, it took her an hour just to make dinner. She can't do a single household chore properly." Even Carter's father joined in the attack, and my daughter's shoulders shook. If that's the case, couldn't Carter's mother have supported her? However, Carter's mother crossed her arms and said in a strong tone, "When I came here as a bride, I was made to do everything and told to learn through experience." That's right. It's generational change. "But I was watching over her properly," Carter's father said, as if to say they had done nothing wrong, and they nodded at each other. Apparently, Carter's mother had pushed all the housework onto Leighton while doing whatever she wanted. Moreover, Carter's father, who had already retired and was at home, had been constantly monitoring Leighton, interfering with everything she did. They had even taken away Leighton's phone to prevent her from telling me about this, and when I visited their house, they had restrained her to prevent her from going outside. And this wasn't all. Leighton believed that Carter would change someday, that he would help her. Despite the terrible treatment, Leighton's hope that Carter would change was in vain. The treatment from her in-laws only escalated. They made her eat leftovers and, claiming it was a waste of gas, barely let her use more than a trickle of water for showers. When Leighton, unable to bear it anymore, told them this isn't right, it led to the unbearable injuries on her body. In response to my daughter's objection, they called her insolent and slapped her hard on the cheek. Not only that, saying they would re-educate her, they took turns beating her all over her body. Finally released while covered in injuries, Leighton felt her life was in danger and, waiting for the moment when all three were sound asleep, fled from her in-laws' house. She walked for over an hour, barely escaping with her life, before arriving at our house. Before the wedding, you treated Leighton preciously. Why did you change so much? I can't accept this. When I confronted them with a strong tone, the three looked at each other and smirked. From the beginning, I just wanted a wife who would obey me. I thought Leighton would make a good servant. Carter said this nonchalantly, and his mother sighed, saying, she was really disappointing. Well, she must have learned her lesson from this incident. Why don't we give her another chance? At this unbelievable suggestion from Carter's father, they looked at each other and burst into laughter. That's enough. I can't forgive this anymore. Before I could respond, anger welling up from every part of my body, Leighton stared at the three of them and spoke out. How dare you speak to us like that? When an angry Carter tried to grab my daughter, I quickly restrained him in a hold and pinned him to the floor, immobilizing him. As he struggled and his parents stood dumbfounded at my quick movement, I said, I didn't mention it before, but when I was young, I was on the verge of making it to the Olympics in wrestling. I had to give it up due to an injury. I increased the pressure on Carter, who was pinned down, and he started flailing his arms and legs with tears in his eyes. When I loosened my grip, he slumped down, sitting weakly. How pathetic. Now, who should I deal with next? I said, cracking my knuckles as I slowly approached his parents. Please stop. They covered their heads and started trembling violently. I sent my daughter off wishing for her happiness, but I will never forgive you for putting her through this. All three of them shrank back completely at my fierce demeanor. Carter, please divorce me, Leighton said, following my lead, and presented the divorce papers in front of Carter. What are you talking about? I absolutely won't divorce you. He refused, his face turning red. This morning, I took my daughter to the hospital and got a medical certificate for her injuries, and I've also filed a police report. We have no fault in this, so we'll fight this to the end. I told them slowly, looking at each of the three in turn. Then, this time sweating profusely from their foreheads, they started panicking, crying out things like, please stop, and, what about our reputation? I want to divorce as soon as possible, Leighton said, looking at them with disgust. I look forward to seeing what happens to you now. You'd better regret what you've done. We gathered Leighton's belongings and headed for the entrance. Wait! We heard Carter's pitiful voice behind us, but Leighton and I left her in-laws' house without looking back. After that, the divorce was successfully finalized, and Leighton claimed $20,000 in compensation from Carter. The police report was also accepted, and the three of them were questioned by the police. Although they were released soon after, I heard that the police also came to their house to inspect the scene, which became a topic of gossip in the neighborhood, and they were now being looked at with suspicion. When Leighton told her former colleagues about the mistreatment she received from Carter, the news spread to his company, which was their client, and Carter was removed from the fast track to promotion. Meanwhile, Leighton slowly healed her mental and physical wounds at our home and then started moving forward to find a new workplace. My life is still far from over too. In fact, I've started training because I want to get involved with wrestling again. What are you doing here? Early one morning at the garbage dump, I saw a small girl rummaging through the trash. Her clothes were dirty, her hair was a mess, and she was eating rotten bread with single-minded focus. But when she turned to look at me, I was struck speechless with surprise. Because that child was my 6-year-old granddaughter. Why? This child 2 years ago. I hurriedly contacted my son, who replied with confusion, "We've only ever had boys." After that, I would come to discover a terrifying truth unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I'm a part-time housewife who's finished raising her children. Though I was lonely after losing my police officer husband, I was enjoying a carefree retirement on my own. My son Tim already has his own family, with 1 girl and 1 boy. Kind and caring Blair, and easygoing Sebastian. My adorable grandchildren. Even from a parent's perspective, they had built an exemplary, peaceful home. My house, my daughter-in-law's parents' house, and my son's family's house were all in the same city. We had a good relationship as relatives, occasionally visiting each other. If there was one thing that concerned me, it might be my son's wife, Sandra. She was what you'd call a young lady from a good family, and her parents were successful businesspeople who owned several properties. A bit different from our ordinary family, with a different sensibility. Sandra had grown up getting everything she wanted from a young age, and even in her 30s, she still seemed to rely on her parents and others, as my son had mentioned. The other day, there was a field trip for Blair's kindergarten, and since Sandra said it would be hard to take Christian by herself, I went along too. Oh, that sounds fun. Yes. But Sandra was glued to Sebastian the whole time. I know he's younger so it can't be helped, but Blair looked a bit lonely. A father using his vacation days to participate in his child's event to reduce his wife's burden was unfamiliar in my time, but I suppose this is how modern parents are. Still, from a man's perspective, it's not a bad feeling to be relied upon. Apparently, Sandra wasn't a spoiled young lady in college, but rather a popular girl who made people want to protect her. My son was no exception, being one of those charmed by her. Since such minor things didn't interfere with daily life, neither my son nor I made a big deal out of it. But that everyday life changed dramatically in the summer when Blair was 4 and Christian was 2, when they went camping as a family. An incident occurred. Unbelievably, Blair went missing when her parents took their eyes off her for a moment. My son and his wife searched desperately, but they couldn't find Blair. Of course, I and Sandra's parents also did everything we could to find Blair. We even recruited volunteers and involved the media in a big commotion. However, unfortunately, a typhoon hit the area the day after they went camping, hampering the search. 3 days later, shoes and belongings thought to be Blair's were found downstream in the river. Of course, due to the heavy rain, the river's flow had become faster and the water level had risen. These factors led to the conclusion that Blair had passed away, and the search was regrettably called off. While the whole family was grieving, the one who never accepted it was Sandra. "Please keep looking. I'll pay as much as it takes. She's definitely still alive." Her figure clinging to those around her who hesitated with words like, "We're so sorry, but," was pitiful to watch. It's understandable. After all, it was her first child. There's no way she could give up so easily. But still, that child is probably. Even with so many people and so much time invested, Blair couldn't be found. Even if she were found, everyone, including myself, thought she wouldn't be alive anymore. Since then, Sandra blamed herself, saying, "It's my fault that my daughter." And for a time, she fell into a very dangerous state. She hurt herself, stopped eating, couldn't go out, wouldn't speak to anyone. You still have Sebastian. If you disappear, you'll make him feel the same pain you're feeling. My son and I desperately supported and encouraged Sandra, and it took 2 years for her to recover from her despair. Christian turned 4, and Sandra rarely became depressed anymore, but... What? You're buying again. We just bought a toy car last week. It can wait. If you want a new one, maybe for your birthday. Christian says he wants it now. Who knows if next time will ever come. Sandra began fulfilling all of Christian's wishes and pouring money into him, as if to make up for what she couldn't do for Blair. Of course, if this continued, Christian's selfishness would only increase, and he gradually stopped listening not only to his grandparents like me and his maternal grandparents, but even to his father, Tim. However, because of the incident with Blair, no one in the family could caution Sandra. Her parents, if anything, seemed to become even more active in providing financial support and taking care of Christian, perhaps out of pity for Sandra. I understand it can't be helped, but it feels like things are heading in a bad direction. While harboring such concerns, one day I woke up early and decided to go for a walk while taking out the trash. Come to think of it, recently the neighbors had been saying that there'd been an increase in mischief like trash bags being opened. In my area, you can put out trash from the night before, so a considerable amount of kitchen waste had been put out by early morning. Therefore, measures against crows and stray cats were thorough, so it was rumored to be the work of humans. Huh? What's that? As I was thinking about this and about to turn the corner of the street, I heard a rustling sound from the garbage dump a little distance away. I noticed a large shadow rummaging through the trash bags and instinctively stopped in my tracks. Mischief. A homeless person. This is unpleasant. What should I do? I felt compelled to do something since I had seen it. As I approached little by little, the figure gradually came into clear view. That's a person, right? A child. The sight I saw at the garbage dump shrouded in morning mist is one I will never forget for the rest of my life. The figure of a small child prying open the mouth of a bag and frantically stuffing rotten bread into their cheeks. What are you doing here? I found myself saying loudly without thinking. The child, who looked at me, startled and trembling, seemed to freeze in surprise and showed no signs of running away. Her clothes and body were dirty, and her hair was unkempt. I could tell at a glance that something was not right. The child and I stared at each other for a while, saying nothing. Oh no. It's good that I called out, but what should I do next? If it were an animal, I could shoo it away, and if it were a strange person, I was planning to run away. You shouldn't eat things like this. You'll get sick. After thinking it over, I decided to speak in a gentle tone to try to put her at ease. However, as I approached, the child made a gesture as if covering her head and began apologizing repeatedly, saying, "I'm sorry." Hearing the same words repeated like a broken record, I was at a loss. Calm down. I'm not angry. It's okay. As I got closer to soothe the child, I realized something. I recognized that child's voice and features. Have we met somewhere before? As I peered into the child's face, she seemed to sense something about me too. Blair. Yes. I'm Blair. Hearing her words, I gasped. This child was my granddaughter who was supposed to have died 2 years ago. Is it really you? Are you really Blair? She nodded in response to my question. Where had she been and what had she been doing for 2 years? Should I report this? Various thoughts were swirling in my head, but for now, I took her to my home for protection. I kind of remember Grandma's house. After giving her food, having her take a shower, and dressing her in clean clothes, she seemed to have enough composure to reminisce about my house she hadn't visited in a long time. While I was trying my best to smile so as not to upset Blair, who had finally calmed down, I remember feeling extremely anxious inside. Because Blair's body was covered in marks from being hit and pinched. She should have been 6 years old at this time, but she looked short for her age and seemed underweight. Then, there was something even more perplexing. Despite clearly not having been taken care of, Blair had somehow acquired a certain level of education. She understood table manners during meals, and could read, write, and do simple calculations. Since a child can't acquire living habits on their own, it means she must have been living with someone all this time. I was elated to know Blair was alive, but when I thought about it, doesn't this have criminal implications? Once I thought that, I suddenly became afraid of dealing with the problem alone. So, the first thing I thought to do was contact my son. Mom, are you okay? Aren't you dreaming? The time was 6 a.m. If you suddenly get a call from your mother early in the morning saying, your granddaughter who was supposed to be dead has returned, that kind of reaction is understandable. Blair disappeared 2 years ago. We only have a boy now. Get a hold of yourself. My son's voice on the phone sounded somewhat sad and angry. I thought it was the right decision not to contact Sandra first. It would be pitiful to say something confusing just as she had finally accepted her daughter's disappearance and was starting to look forward. I wouldn't joke about something like this. Just come to my house. I almost forcibly summoned my son to the house and had him meet Blair. Dad? Blair? Is it really you, Blair? Seeing their reactions, I breathed a sigh of relief. Despite meeting after 2 years, Blair clearly remembered her father's face. How happy that must have made my son. Where have you been all this time? How did you survive? Were you taken by someone? Did you escape and come here? Hey, don't say things that will make her anxious. My son kept asking questions that I had deliberately avoided asking. Firing off questions one after another was making Blair confused. However, contrary to such concerns, she slowly shook her head. You know, I've been. She slowly and calmly began to speak. My son and I, who learned the whole terrifying, sad, and shocking truth, couldn't forgive the person who had tormented her for 2 years. So, we decided to have them receive appropriate punishment. To avoid alerting the culprit, we entrusted Blair to someone we could trust after explaining the situation, and we continued our usual lives as if nothing had happened for a while. We gathered collaborators and prepared for any contingencies. It was on the morning of the 5th day after rescuing Blair that I received a call from my son saying, "I found out where that person is going. Mom, I think I should go alone after all. We don't know what might happen." What are you saying at this point? The preparations are ready, so don't worry. We got into Tim's car and headed to a certain place. That place was a villa area a little distance from my house. It was a rental villa quietly tucked away in the most inconspicuous spot among them. Dad said this one is smaller and not in a good location, so it's hard to find buyers. This villa was one of the properties owned by Sandra's parents. With mountains nearby and surrounded by dense trees, this place carved out of the forest would be perfect for hiding people or shady activities. My son and I steeled ourselves and walked towards the garage with the shutter slightly open. It was so dark inside, despite it being daytime, that we couldn't see what was in the back. However, an eerie sound of metal being dragged echoed in the dark, enclosed space. There's no doubt that person is here. The child isn't here. When I called out towards the sound, a flashlight beam suddenly illuminated my son and me. Mother-in-law. Tim. Why are you here? There stood Sandra, holding a metal bat in one hand, rummaging through the garage. She's not here. I could only repeat my earlier words in a trembling voice. Even though I knew this was coming, when actually faced with it, I still felt fear. Because Sandra's face emerging from the darkness was so uncanny. No, I was just organizing the garage. Sandra answered without addressing the mention of she, even though we hadn't asked. Her tone of voice was normal, and her mouth was smiling, but her eyes weren't. We already know everything you've done to your own daughter. Probably by the time we came here, she must have realized that her misdeeds had been discovered. What she intended to do to whom with that bat in her hand, I don't want to think about any further. What were you planning to do to Blair with that metal bat, you devil? In contrast to me, who was hesitating, Tim confronted Sandra head-on. It's understandable, given that he couldn't see his beloved daughter for 2 years, and the culprit who had kept Blair in terrible conditions was right in front of him. Devil? Me? No, she's the devil. Triggered by Tim's words, Sandra struck the bat on the floor and threw a tantrum. Sandra, why? What did Blair do to you? I had decided my first child would be a boy, but she ruined everything by being born. What are you talking about? What kind of nonsense is this? Listening carefully to my daughter-in-law's story, it was an utterly ridiculous and selfish reasoning. When Sandra was pregnant with Blair, she was consistently told by the doctor during regular checkups that the baby in her belly was a boy. My daughter-in-law, who had been hoping for a boy, was overjoyed and bought many baby items for boys during her pregnancy. I remember that well. However, a girl was born. Even if the gender was different from expected, a child is a child. A grandchild is a grandchild. There's no way they wouldn't be lovable. My son and I had considered it as a funny story to laugh about. But my daughter-in-law was different. I bought cute clothes and bragged to my friends, but it all went to waste and I was embarrassed. That's just your convenience. Besides, when Sebastian was born, we could pass down the clothes we bought then to him, so nothing went to waste. It doesn't mean anything if it's not the first child. You wouldn't understand. Even I, as a woman who has experienced childbirth, couldn't understand her obsession, so it's natural that my son wouldn't understand. All the baby clothes Sebastian wore were Blair's hand-me-downs. Poor thing. But I tried, you know. I tried to accept Blair. But I just couldn't do it. My daughter-in-law shrugged with a half-smile. I'm not cut out for patience. I've never had anything not go my way before. If she wasn't here, I could give more love to my son. Her expression as she said this with wide eyes was strangely confident, as if she were saying something completely natural. What do you mean by love? Is spending a lot of money your idea of love? That's how my parents always treated me. But don't you think I'm kind? I kept that child alive and raised her. I even educated her. I gave her a reason to live. Out of sadness and anger, I involuntarily covered my face with both hands. What Blair had told us herself was true. On that day when I discovered Blair at the garbage dump, she gradually told us what had happened to her. During the camping trip, she said she was taken to a villa by a man claiming to be Sandra's friend in order to stay in a makeshift living space created in the garage. How did you bring Blair here? At that time, you never left Sebastian's side, right? In this world, there are people who will do anything if you pay them enough. Of course, it would be troublesome afterwards if I did it myself. Blair had also talked about the meaning of life that Sandra wanted to give her daughter. Blair said she had to earn money for her brother and mom. That's right. I taught her that over 2 years. I felt nauseous at Sandra's complete lack of remorse. Is that what a mother does? That child said she thought if she worked hard to earn money, her mom would smile again. Huh. So she still thought she was loved. Sandra replied, playing with her hair, as if she couldn't care less. The reason Blair had age-appropriate reading and living habits was because otherwise, she couldn't be made to earn money. Sandra really seems to think only in terms of money. No, to me, she no longer looked like a person in human form, but a monster, and it seemed Tim felt the same way. Hey, you told Blair she didn't need to learn anything else. That customers prefer stupid ones. What were you planning to make our daughter do? Do you want to know? Saying this, Sandra let out a creepy laugh. Tim, stop it. I restrained my son who was about to grab Sandra. Even if she's this kind of person, if we lay hands on her first, it would put my son at a disadvantage. I was also full of the desire to lunge at her, but I decided to hold back here. But that brat really has no guts. Just because I skipped bringing food for 3 days, would a normal person go rummaging through garbage? I failed. I never thought she could go that far on her own. Sandra grumbled in frustration, which was nothing short of abnormal. Stop it. How could you say such terrible things? You guys asked, didn't you? Besides, doesn't everyone throw away things they don't need? Her attitude of speaking as if it were common sense really angered me. Her parents are said to be decent people, so how did such a monster come to be? We'll turn you over to the police. Be prepared to face the law. Huh? What are you talking about? Of course, you, Blair, and everyone else will have to disappear. As soon as she said this, Sandra took out a lighter from her pocket and pointed it towards a nearby car. Looking closely, gasoline was leaking from the car body, wetting the floor. You idiot, stop this foolishness. That's right, if you do that, even you. Shut up. Sandra hit the car body with the bat, causing a large dent and more gasoline to drip. If things don't go my way, it's better if everyone becomes charred and disappears. Sandra shouted while laughing loudly, clearly out of her mind. Persuasion is no longer possible. There's no choice. I softened my expression and spoke gently to Sandra. I understand. It must have been hard for you all alone. I'll be on your side, so please put down the lighter. Mom, what are you saying? When I gave a subtle eye signal to my surprised son, he seemed to understand my intention. Sandra, I'm sorry. I apologize. We won't tell anyone. We'll do as you say, so please help us. When Tim also showed signs of complying with Sandra, she smiled with satisfaction. Put your hands behind your back. Sit facing the wall. As we did as she said, Sandra slowly started walking, not taking her eyes off us. Where's Blair? She's with my friend. She's at the house 2 doors down from ours. The moment Sandra stood at the entrance of the garage, at Tim's signal, sturdy older men who had been hiding nearby all rushed to restrain Sandra at once. They shouted, "Secured!" Caught in the act, while swiftly subduing Sandra. "What is this? Let go of me." These people are retired former police officers, all friends of my husband. They've remained close to me even after my husband passed away. When I told them about my granddaughter's situation, they agreed to cooperate fully. Actually, my pocket had contained a mobile phone in an ongoing call the whole time. The phone was connected to these friends. They were the ones who said, "To ensure Blair doesn't return to her mother's custody, let's gather solid evidence." All of our exchanges have been recorded, and there are this many witnesses. Stop your unsightly behavior now. It will only make your crime more severe. Shut up, you old hag. You think you can do this to me and get away with it? I'm going to tell Daddy and Mommy. I was so dumbfounded by her textbook villainous words that I couldn't find a response. Hey, Tim. Don't you feel anything seeing your wife like this? Help me. I'm the mother of your child. I can only feel hatred for you now. We don't need a mother who torments her children. Tim was straightforward, showing no lingering affection for the woman he once loved. No way. Mother-in-law. Blair won't abandon me, right? She said she'd work hard for me. Besides, taking a child away from their mother. Are you serious? Do you really think such emotional blackmail will work? I wished she hadn't turned to me here, but perhaps she thought I might still be swayed as a fellow mother. She underestimated me. There are many children who forgive their parents no matter how terribly they're treated. Blair is kind, so she probably still likes you. That's right. That's right. Mother-in-law, I knew you'd understand. Because we're both mothers. Stop it. Don't lump me in with you. I looked straight at Sandra with a serious gaze. Blair had her existence erased for 2 years, her rights taken away, unloved and alone. She's just a 6-year-old girl. As I spoke, I desperately held back the tears that threatened to come. I should have searched more thoroughly. I should have noticed Sandra's abnormality. If I had, we might have been able to save Blair earlier. For Blair's sake, we can't forgive you. Everything you tried to do to her will now come back to you. What? What do you mean? When you return, there will be no one waiting for you. You'll lose your home, family, and friends. You'll be unloved, eventually forgotten, and meet a lonely end. Hearing this, Sandra's face instantly turned pale, and she began to cry. Considering what you did to Blair and what you were planning to do, it's only natural retribution. By this time, active police officers had arrived. They exchanged salutes with my friends and dragged away the screaming Sandra. Blair's physical condition, testimony, and the recorded evidence were decisive, and Sandra was arrested. She ended up spending some time behind bars. My son divorced her and gained custody, demanding a lump sum payment of $20,000 in compensation and $150,000 in child support, all of which was paid. Sandra's parents also apologized. They said, "We made a mistake in raising our daughter. We won't be involved with her anymore," and sold their properties to move to a distant state. My son and I also moved to a new place and are living a new life. Blair has started attending kindergarten and is now happily surrounded by kind friends and teachers. Blair, who is looking forward to starting elementary school, and cute Christian who follows her around. I intend to continue showering them both with lots of love. It was an accident. There's nothing we can do about it. My husband wouldn't accept my plea after I miscarried due to being tripped by my mother-in-law, who was living with us. Even though I could no longer bear children. I hope it's born healthy. 3 years later, my mother-in-law joyfully celebrated my sister-in-law's pregnancy. Treated like a servant every day, my spirit was completely worn down at the time. However, after this, an unexpected turn of events reversed all circumstances, greatly changing my life. My name is Kristen. I married Scott, who was 3 years older than me, when I was 25. We had attended the same university, and I fell in love with him at first sight. After pursuing him relentlessly, he finally noticed me, proposed, and we got married. I was on cloud 9, looking forward to a life with my beloved Scott, who was handsome and kind. But little did I know then that this would be the beginning of difficult days. The first challenge came right after we tied the knot. About our new home, it's okay if we live with Mom, right? Dad's passed away, so she'd be alone otherwise. I was taken aback by Scott's sudden proposal. Before marriage, I had been living alone, but he had been living at home. I had assumed we would look for a new house to live in together. Huh? Aren't we going to live by ourselves? Actually, Mom told me that if we were to get married, living together was a prerequisite. I never heard about this. I blurted out in shock at my husband's sudden confession. Apparently, he had already made an agreement with his mother to live together without my knowledge. This alone was hard to accept, but there was another problem. It seemed that my mother-in-law didn't like me very much. During our first meeting and at the wedding, she only spoke to me when absolutely necessary and occasionally gave me cold looks. I wasn't confident I could get along with a mother-in-law in such a state. However, my husband didn't seem to understand my concerns at all. What's the problem with living together? Don't worry, you'll get along well with Mom. When my beloved said this with a big smile, I couldn't respond. And so, I ended up living in Scott's family home, pushed by his optimistic attitude. But as I had feared, my concerns came true. Sigh. Your cooking isn't very good, is it? To spend so much time making such tasteless food. But it took so long because you forced me to clean in the middle of cooking. Are you talking back? Just because you're young and my son likes you, don't get cocky. You incompetent girl. It seemed my mother-in-law was jealous of me, her son's wife. She couldn't stand to see me happy, so she made me quit my job saying, a woman should stay at home after marriage, and pushed all the housework onto me, harassing me when my husband wasn't around. She would spill flour right after I had cleaned, or throw away the food I had made. Even when I talked to Scott about it, all he would say was, I'll talk to her, but despite pushing for us to live together, he didn't do anything. So, even though we were newlyweds, I was already stressed out. But in the midst of all this, there was one person who was on my side. I can't believe it. You're leaving everything to Kristen. Mom, you can move too, you need to share the work. It was my sister-in-law, Vanessa, who scolded my mother-in-law for lounging on the sofa while I was doing housework. It's fine. Kristen wants to do it. That can't be true. Scott, you need to properly scold Mom too. Why am I getting scolded too? Vanessa, who was mature for her 22 years, not only scolded Scott, who was watching TV, but also helped me with the housework. Let's do it together, she said with a cheerful smile, and I felt my heart being healed. Vanessa had been friendly with me since I started dating her brother. But there was a reason why she had become so attached to me, related to an incident a few years ago. That day, Vanessa was heading to her final interview at her first-choice company during her job hunt, but the train was delayed. When I happened to see her looking lost at the station, I drove her to the venue. After that, she successfully got the job offer and started working at that company, and she became even more fond of me. I'll always be on your side. Vanessa's carefree smile was one of the reasons I could endure these lonely days. However, a few months later, a big incident occurred that even her support couldn't help. Honey, I'm pregnant. One day, feeling something off about my body, I went to the hospital and called Scott with the exciting news. Having children had always been my dream. That's great. So I'm going to be a dad. Hearing Scott's happy voice on the phone, my heart was filled with joy like never before. Despite my worries, I still loved my husband at that time. Just thinking about raising a child together with him made my heart flutter. Surely now Scott will pay more attention to our family. However, even at this point, my mother-in-law seemed to resent my happiness. I wasn't expecting much, but when I told her about the pregnancy, she just nodded indifferently. There was no consideration for my condition, rather, she started making me go shopping at distant stores and carry heavy furniture, increasingly burdening me. Then, on a day when my belly had grown quite big, it happened. Geez! You're so slow, you're in the way. My mother-in-law, more irritated than usual, suddenly pushed me from behind. As a result, I lost my balance and hit my stomach hard on the corner of a table. Ouch! At that moment, I was struck by a pain I had never experienced before. With a bad feeling, I called an ambulance myself and headed to the hospital, leaving my mother-in-law who had fled to her room. The test results were horrific, something I wanted to turn away from. Not only had I miscarried due to the impact, but I had also become unable to have children. Because of you, I can never meet my baby again. How are you going to take responsibility for this? When I returned home, I confronted my mother-in-law, crying in shock. If only she hadn't done such a thing, I might have been able to meet my child in good health. It's your fault for being so clumsy, isn't it? How cowardly of you to blame others. But my mother-in-law didn't even show a hint of apology and continued to hurl abuse at me. And what shocked me the most were my husband's words after I explained the whole situation. I understand you're sad, but it was an accident, right? there's nothing we can do about it. He didn't even try to accept my tearful plea. Even though I could no longer hope for children, why did my husband think he could dismiss it as unavoidable? Was his joy over the pregnancy a lie? Let me tell you, don't even think about something stupid like divorce. If you leave, I'll bring Vanessa back to take care of the housework. After Scott returned to his room, my mother-in-law drove the nail in, as if to further crush my despair. Honestly, divorce had crossed my mind, as she said, but I couldn't let my dear sister-in-law go through these days. When Vanessa learned about the miscarriage, she naturally scolded my mother-in-law, but even her voice was no longer a comfort to me. As if she had given up, Vanessa's visits gradually decreased. I want Vanessa to be happy. With all hope taken away and despairing for the future, I just mechanically went about doing household chores as ordered by my mother-in-law. I even felt it was pointless to think about anything anymore. But after 3 years of lonely time, one day, an unexpected turn of events occurred that reversed all circumstances. Vanessa, who hadn't shown her face for a while, came to the house. Actually, I'm pregnant with my loved one's baby. I'm planning to marry him soon. That's wonderful. I hope the baby is born healthy. My mother-in-law was overjoyed at Vanessa's somewhat radiant announcement. It was unfortunate with Kristen, so you be careful. And as Scott smiled without any ill intent, I excused myself to go shopping, leaving the scene. As much as I wanted to be happy about Vanessa's pregnancy, I couldn't bear to see his reaction, which was completely different from when it was me. But that's when it happened. Kristen. When I turned around after hearing my name called, to my surprise, Vanessa had run after me. What's wrong? You need to be careful with your body. Actually, there's something I really want to tell you. And then she approached me with an unexpected story. Vanessa strongly grasped my hand as I stood bewildered after hearing everything. Now it's my turn to help you. At Vanessa's words, looking at me with straight eyes, tears that I thought had long since dried up overflowed from my eyes. A few months later, I was waiting at home with my mother-in-law and husband for Vanessa to arrive. Today was finally the day she had promised to bring her fiancé. I'm home. I've brought him. Vanessa arrived at the house with a tall, polite man. And the next moment, Scott stared at the man with wide eyes. Huh? Mr. Miller. As Scott stood up in shock, Vanessa grinned at him. Are you surprised? You probably never thought my fiancé would be the son of your company's president, did you? It turned out that the man called Mr. Miller was working at the same company as Scott to take over his father's business. In other words, he was the young master. Apparently, Mr. Miller had fallen in love at first sight with Vanessa, who was working as a receptionist at another company, and their relationship had developed from there. So Vanessa will be the president's wife in the future. As expected of my daughter. Understanding the situation, my mother-in-law expressed even more joy. Although he still seemed bewildered, Scott also had a happy smile on his face. Probably thinking that having the president of a first-class company as a relative would bring them some benefit. However, betraying their expectations, I quietly stood next to Vanessa. But this will be the last time she comes to this house. My mother-in-law and Scott gaped, unable to grasp the situation. The truth is, at this point, Vanessa and I had already made a certain decision. Huh? Don't say such selfish things. You were just ignoring it, but Vanessa has always been angry about what's been happening. A few seconds later, I glared coldly at my mother-in-law, who had shouted as if coming to her senses. Then Vanessa stepped forward and began to reveal her true feelings in a low voice. I've been warning you about how you treat Kristen, but since it seems your personality won't change, I'm cutting ties with you. On that day when Vanessa stopped me, she told me about a certain plan. For these 3 years, she had been worried about me and was plotting to somehow free me from my mother-in-law. The reason Vanessa stopped coming home was that she had given up on trying to make my mother-in-law and Scott, who showed no signs of remorse, change their ways. However, she was trying to rescue me with a different strategy. And that plan was to cut ties with her family home, including me, on the occasion of her marriage. Don't tell me you're still holding a grudge about the child. Of course. What Mom did to Kristen is absolutely unforgivable. I was speechless with Scott, who was standing there dumbfounded after being admonished by Vanessa. What on earth did I fall in love with in this man before we got married? That's all made up. I didn't do anything. You're being deceived by this woman. Despite being told so much by Vanessa, my mother-in-law, refusing to admit her faults, pointed her finger at me. In response to her, I took out my smartphone, seizing the opportunity. Can you still say that after seeing this? Finally closing her mouth in shock at the video being played, my mother-in-law. It was evidence footage of harassment that I had been collecting for several months since hearing about Vanessa's plan. Thanks to her, I found courage. I'm submitting this to a lawyer and divorcing Scott. Vanessa gave me an unchanged smile as I strongly declared this. For a long time, I had given up on my own future, feeling hopeless and that nothing could be done. However, thanks to her reaching out to me, I was finally able to take action to carve out a bright future for myself. Divorce? No way. I refuse. By the way, we know what you did too. Vanessa sharply cut off Scott, who had started to throw a tantrum. As if he had a guilty conscience, he stiffened in surprise. And as if this was a signal, Mr. Miller, who had been quiet until now, started to explain the situation, saying, "We did a little investigation at the company." According to him, Scott's self-centered attitude was the same at work. He harassed subordinates who didn't do as he wanted, bullied colleagues he didn't like into resigning, and these misdeeds came to light with just a little digging by Mr. Miller. Apparently, this had already been reported to his father, the president, and there was already talk of firing Scott. No way. Divorce and getting fired from work is impossible. How am I supposed to live without a job or family? Realizing the gravity of the situation, Scott turned pale and cried out in anguish. Seeing him collapse, my mother-in-law also started to panic. Please, both of you, don't say such strange things. Besides, Kristen has nowhere to go even if she leaves here, right? It's already decided that Kristen will be employed at his company. Mom, give it up. At Vanessa's merciless words, both of them turned their gaze to me. Come on, reconsider. We're husband and wife, right? If things stay like this, we won't be able to live. Help us, Kristen. I sighed deeply at the two desperately clinging to me. In the end, they just wanted to use me for their own benefit until the very end. There was no reason for me to lend a hand to such people. This is all the outcome you brought upon yourselves. Don't make me laugh by asking for help now. And so, I shook them off and left the house with Vanessa and Mr. Miller. After that, I successfully divorced Scott. With the evidence I had gathered, it was determined that the treatment I had received was terrible, and my mother-in-law was ordered to pay $30,000 in compensation. And as Mr. Miller had said, Scott was fired from the company. My mother-in-law and Scott, who had been living on inheritance and pension, are now living in poverty together, I hear. On the other hand, Vanessa cut ties with her family home and is now happily married to Mr. Miller. I also continue my relationship with her, have returned to society, and am now living a fulfilling life. From now on, I want to live. Where am I? It's pitch black, and I can't see anything. I, who had been knocked unconscious during my mother-in-law's funeral, awoke to find myself trapped in a cramped box-like space. I desperately tried to push and bang on the lid to open it. Then, I heard a man's voice approaching, saying, "Now, it's time for the cremation." And the box I was in started to rattle. Could it be, am I inside a coffin? It seemed they were about to cremate me, and I was utterly terrified. Was I about to be sent to the afterlife like this? I'm Jasmine. I married Brandon, who was 2 years older than me and worked at the city hall, when I was 24. Although we didn't live with his parents, his mother lived nearby. Jasmine, if you ever need anything, just let me know. My mother-in-law was always kind and easy to talk to. For me, who had lost my parents at a young age, she was like a real mother. At first, my husband and I lived happily together, but from the second year, conflicts increased due to his wasteful spending. You want living expenses. You're working full-time too, so you must have money, right? I've been paying for rent, utilities, and food all by myself since last year. I want you to share the burden properly. It's always money, money, money with you. Do you think I'm an ATM or something? Whenever I tried to discuss finances, Brandon would always deflect the conversation and shut himself in his room, so we couldn't have a proper discussion. Although Brandon had a stable income as a civil servant, he didn't contribute money to the household and often went out late at night. He would come home drunk in the middle of the night, emptying his wallet after treating his colleagues. This was no way to live. At my wit's end, I decided to work not only at my daytime job selling insurance but also at a pub at night. I reported this to my mother-in-law as well. You shouldn't push yourself so hard. I'll talk to Brandon about it. When she found out I had started working nights too, my usually quiet mother-in-law became furious. I've tried talking to him many times, but he won't listen. I see. I'm so sorry about my foolish son. If only my husband were still alive at a time like this. Maybe it's because I raised him poorly. Actually, my father-in-law had already passed away before I married Brandon. My distraught mother-in-law tried to offer financial assistance, but I couldn't burden her, who was living alone. I'll try to have a proper talk with Brandon again. Then at least let me drive you to and from the pub. I can't let you bear all the hardship. With my mother-in-law's help, I managed to earn enough to cover our living expenses. She was a good driver, and our conversations during the rides were lively and comforting. It seemed that my mother-in-law had been frequently warning Brandon about money matters, but his wasteful spending didn't stop. "Hey, tomorrow's Mom's funeral, so get ready." "What? What do you mean?" One morning, just before leaving for work, Brandon casually informed me that his mother had passed away. Shocked, I pressed him for details, but Brandon just glared at me irritably. "Shut up. Mom died in a car accident. Are you enjoying wasting my time before work? Can't you at least say, 'Have a good day,' or something?" He snapped at me and left in a bad mood. "This can't be happening to your mother." What exactly happened? I knew she was an excellent driver from when she drove me to and from the pub. No matter how many times I asked Brandon about the accident, he wouldn't tell me anything. I was overwhelmed by a profound sadness and despair, as if the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. "I have a friend at the funeral home we're using, so make arrangements with him." "I'm too busy with work." My husband left the house, dumping all the preparations on me, who was at a loss for words, with an annoyed look on his face. After that, I couldn't get in touch with him, and I spent my time preparing to bid farewell to my mother-in-law. The next day, Brandon showed up at the funeral home with a grin on his face. I noticed him and rushed over, but he wouldn't even make eye contact with me. "Where have you been? Your phone was off, and you stayed somewhere last night, didn't you?" "Not really." My husband refused to answer my questions. During the funeral, Brandon occasionally chatted with the attendees, but mostly just yawned. He even fell asleep at times. Don't you feel sad that such a kind mother-in-law is gone? I could only feel disappointed in my husband's behavior. At one point, he suddenly looked my way. "Go get the spare cigarettes and lighter from the car." I couldn't leave the chief mourner, Brandon, alone at the venue. Following his instructions, which came with an unusually harsh glare, I headed to the parking lot. I can't find them. I searched around the driver's seat but couldn't find anything, so I started looking in the back seat. Suddenly, the sunlight was blocked by something behind me, and my surroundings darkened. Is someone behind me? Just as I was about to turn around, I felt a dull sound and intense pain in my head, and everything went black. I lost consciousness before I could even understand what had happened. I don't know how much time had passed. I was awakened by a throbbing, intense headache. It was a place as dark as if my eyes were still closed. Where am I? When I tried to get up, I realized I seemed to be trapped in a narrow box-like space and couldn't move. I pushed and banged on the wall in front of me, trying to get out somehow. Then, I heard a man's voice approaching, saying, "Now, it's time for the cremation," and the box I was in started to rattle. Could it be? Am I inside a coffin? At that moment, I realized I was about to be burned alive and was utterly terrified. Let me out. I'm alive. Help. I banged on the coffin with all my might and shouted desperately. Then, I heard the surprised voices of the staff saying, "Hey, there's a sound coming from inside." The lid of the coffin was opened, and I was rescued. Although I had narrowly escaped cremation, I was trembling and pale, and the staff, perhaps out of sympathy, explained the situation to me. Apparently, my husband had requested that I be sent along with his beloved mother, and I had been rushed in for an urgent funeral. And what surprised me most was that I was supposed to have passed away after falling down the stairs. But I was hit when I was looking for cigarettes and a lighter in the car, wasn't I? How could this be? Considering that this happened in the small parking lot of the funeral home, I thought it must have been someone attending the funeral or a staff member who was suspicious. I asked the crematorium staff not to tell anyone that I had come back to life and to pretend to my husband that the cremation had been completed. Apparently, Brandon hadn't even attended his mother's cremation and had said he was going on a 3-day trip and asked for the ashes to be mailed to him. Is that even possible? I was a bit suspicious of his behavior, but to uncover the truth, it would be easier to pretend that the cremation had been completed, using Brandon's words. Then, a staff member revealed a shocking fact to me. What? That's terrible. I was furious at the horrendous incident. I decided in my heart to take revenge on a certain person. However, I still needed more preparation. I needed evidence to hand over to the police the person who had done such a terrible thing. While staying at a hotel, I went to various places, including law offices. And then, at my mother-in-law's house, I discovered something astonishing that she had left behind. With this much evidence gathered, all that was left was to corner that person. For days after being discovered at the crematorium, I decided to return home. When I entered the living room, there was my husband lying on the sofa. A Boston bag was thrown carelessly beside him. He must have just returned from his trip and taken time off work to rest. "Jasmine, why are you alive?" He saw me and shouted in surprise, nearly falling over. "I heard you were flirting with your mistress during the funeral home meeting. I came back from the afterlife because I was so angry." I glared at him, my eyes blazing with anger, and shouted even louder than Brandon's cry of surprise. Actually, the shocking fact I had heard from the staff when I woke up at the crematorium was about my husband's affair. Apparently, he had brought his mistress along, grinning and introducing her to the staff saying, "This is my girlfriend, we're about to go on a trip." I've never seen or heard of anyone bringing their mistress along when they're about to cremate their wife. You're the lowest of the low. I took out photos of evidence of the affair from my handbag and scattered them on the living room table. There were pictures of Brandon flirting with a woman and credit card statements. He stared wide-eyed at the mountain of documents. Actually, I had been investigating the 3-day trip Brandon had mentioned. I found out where they were staying from the first day's card transaction history and rushed there immediately. What I saw was my husband arm in arm with a young woman, looking lovey-dovey on a date. They dined at expensive restaurants, and he bought her luxury brand bags and accessories. You were having an affair even while I was working day and night, and even when I was put in a coffin. You monster. No, it was a business entertainment. I was asked to accompany the daughter of a client. It was tough, you know. Brandon tried to play it off, sweating nervously and averting his eyes. Oh, is that so? I'm sorry for misunderstanding. Of course. You're stupid but try to act smart, that's why you throw these ridiculous hysterics. When I pretended to be fooled and apologized, he suddenly became arrogant. This is how my husband always denied my personality, robbed me of my confidence and hope, and did whatever he wanted after squeezing money out of me. But this time, I won't lose. I had decided to fight to the end, for my mother-in-law's sake too. But I have even more evidence. Don't you want to hear your beloved mistress's voice? I smiled mischievously and showed him a voice recorder I took out of my bag. My husband looked at my hands and squinted suspiciously. I pressed the play button on the recorder and played the recorded audio. It was the mistress confessing her relationship with my husband. Actually, just before returning home that day, I had ambushed the mistress at her home. She was so surprised to see me, who was supposed to be dead and cremated, that she let out a scream. She must have thought I had come back as a ghost. If you confess honestly, I'll forgive you with just compensation. When I threatened her, the woman trembled and cried out, "I'm sorry," with big tears. She spilled everything about what had happened so far, and I recorded her story. And there, it was revealed that the mistress was a staff member at the city hall where Brandon worked. She said she was persistently courted by my husband and, despite knowing he was married, ended up dating him due to his lavish gift attacks. Their relationship had started around the second year of our marriage, just when his wasteful spending began. The mistress cried and clung to me, saying, I couldn't refuse because he was so persistent. He gave me expensive brand gifts, so I thought it was just a bit of fun. The voice echoing in the living room said, "It's not serious at all. I mean, come on, who would fall in love with an old man like that? No way." Brandon muttered and looked at me with an indescribable expression. So you were having an affair, but your partner didn't love you. Too bad after all that money you spent on her. I couldn't help but burst out laughing at my husband's pitiful state. Don't laugh. I gave her so many presents. She said she loved me. He stomped his feet, nearly in tears. But the recording continued to play, detailing his wasteful spending, and ended with the woman's scream, "It was just for the money." That's really all it was. You foolishly existed and got into debt of $60,000 because of money troubles. You good for nothing. I thrust the loan document I had taken out of my bag in front of Brandon's face. I had found that paper when I searched his study during his trip. Furthermore, when I checked the credit card usage history on Brandon's computer, I found evidence of his extravagance over the past 2 years. The reason I couldn't get in touch with my husband from the day before to the day of his mother's funeral was that he had dumped the funeral preparations on me and gone on a trip with his mistress. Your mother must be crying in the afterlife. How much more unfilial can you be? It's not like I had to prepare for the ceremony or anything. You're exaggerating. As a wife, you should have been happy to take care of it. My husband started to abuse me, raising his voice as I accused him. Your lack of filial piety isn't just that. I know you did something even worse. When I glared at my husband with a demonic expression and shouted at him, he shuddered. You aimed for the inheritance to repay your debts. That's why you tampered with your mother's car to cause an accident, right? When I confronted him with the truth, Brandon turned pale and hung his head. Actually, while searching for the person who had hit me, I was able to hear details about the traffic accident that caused my mother-in-law's death from the funeral home staff. Apparently, my mother-in-law, who was a skilled driver, had mistaken the brake for the accelerator. As she was trying to park her car near a store close to her home, she broke through the parking lot fence and fell into the river flowing beyond it, never to return. Because a similar major accident due to pedal confusion had occurred in the same place a year ago, the police had concluded it was another case of mistaking the brake for the accelerator. Feeling that this was unlike my mother-in-law, I had been investigating the accident as well. I placed the results of the investigation of my mother-in-law's accident vehicle, which I had requested from a traffic accident investigation company, on the table while my husband watched with bated breath. Her accident vehicle had already been scrapped, but fortunately, it was still remaining at the scrap yard without being completely dismantled. I had secured the car and, using connections from the insurance company where I worked, had it thoroughly examined by a specialist company. The results showed that the brakes had been unnaturally tampered with to stop working. The car was in a state where it could have had an accident at any time. It could just be deterioration, couldn't it? Brandon, sweating profusely and with lips as white as his pale face, retorted. The investigation company preserved fingerprints that shouldn't have been there during normal driving. I showed my husband the photo attached to the documents. Judging from the size, they must be his. Upon seeing the fingerprints, my husband covered his face with his hands and fell silent. And then you targeted me next. I told Brandon in a quiet voice. Why would I target you? If it was for the inheritance, Mom alone would have been enough. My husband hurriedly denied it, spitting saliva as he spoke, but his voice was trembling and seemed about to fade away. I found these in your mother's drawer while you were enjoying your affair trip. I took out my mother-in-law's will and diary from my bag. These were the surprising things my mother-in-law had left behind. The diary was written in my mother-in-law's handwriting. Do not let my son with a wasteful habit inherit the estate. My inheritance goes to my hard-working daughter-in-law. And to ensure it would definitely be inherited, the name and contact information of the lawyer she had appointed as the executor of her will were also written. As soon as I saw this, it clicked. It was the same name as the middle-aged man Brandon had been eagerly talking to at his mother's funeral. Thinking he must be the lawyer, I immediately headed to his office. When I asked about my mother-in-law's will, he told me that Brandon had urged him to hurry the inheritance process at the funeral. The lawyer told you that according to the will, the inheritance goes to your wife, didn't he? And he said, I was asked to inform you after the funeral was over, so I was planning to tell you after this. When my husband heard this, he looked as if he was about to scream. When you found out you couldn't inherit the property you were counting on to repay your debts, you panicked and lured me into the car, hitting me from behind. Isn't that right? Even if you got rid of your mother, you couldn't get the inheritance. So you intended to silence me, who would inherit, to make sure it would be yours this time. When I stared straight at my husband and declared this, he hung his head. You can't say for sure that I did it. I've even secured the weapon. What? I wiped the blood off the ashtray and put it back in its place. How did you know? Oh my, how do you know the weapon was an ashtray? When I sharply questioned him, Brandon began to panic. Actually, during my husband's trip, I had investigated our home car where I had been hit, as well as the funeral home and parking lot. The inside of the car, which was usually messy, was unusually clean. There were no traces of blood, probably because he had it cleaned. I couldn't find anything that looked like a weapon, but I didn't give up and collected the car's floor mats. I looked around the funeral home too, but couldn't find any clues. Exhausted, I sat down on the curb in the parking lot. When I looked down in despair, I noticed glass fragments glittering in the grooves of the drain cover. Looking closer, the glass fragments had small red stains, and nearby there were small brown leaf-like fragments. I realized these might be tobacco leaves, and the fragments might be from an ashtray. I remembered that on the day of my mother-in-law's funeral, my husband had made a fuss asking, "Where can I smoke?" and staff had guided him to the smoking area on the rooftop terrace. When I went there, I indeed found glass ashtrays, and upon closer inspection, one of them had a chipped bottom. He might have tried to throw away the weapon once, smashing it on the ground, and that's when the blood-stained part chipped off a little. After explaining the situation, I borrowed that ashtray and, through my lawyer, had the evidence examined. It tested positive for my blood and my husband's fingerprints. It was you who hit me. My husband, with everything exposed, came crawling to me, scratching his head. I'm sorry. You're the only one I love. I was jealous that my friend had a mistress, so I imitated him. Look, that guy at the funeral home. He's an old friend of mine. As he was making all sorts of excuses, a call came in from the lawyer. After hearing the content of the call, I glared at my husband. You forged documents and conspired with that friend to try to burn me alive, didn't you? The lawyer had been checking how the city office was handling my supposed death. According to him, I wasn't recorded as deceased, but instead, a missing person report had been filed. Normally, a cremation permit is issued and you take a death certificate written by a doctor to the city office. However, Brandon, wanting to cremate quickly without going through a hospital, had abused his position as a city hall employee to create documents on his own. This forceful method had worked because the person in charge of arranging the cremation was my husband's friend. However, that person had been off sick since the day of my scheduled cremation. So while I was talking with my husband, the lawyer had gone to this person's house to talk and immediately called to report the content. Brandon's friend had become emaciated with guilt for helping to burn someone alive. He confessed that he had been threatened by my husband. I'll give you part of the inheritance as a reward. If you don't help, I'll expose your affair, and so he had helped arrange the cremation. When he was told I was alive, he cried with relief. The lawyer ended the call saying, "I'm heading there with the police. We'll arrive soon. You're the lowest, making even your friend help with your evil deeds, trying to kill your mother and wife. Go to hell." When I shouted loudly, Brandon could no longer even come up with excuses and crouched down weakly on the spot. $50,000 in compensation. I'll also demand $10,000 in compensation from your mistress. Of course, I won't give you any of your mother's inheritance. Pay back the $60,000 debt yourself. Hearing my final words, my husband stared at me with wide eyes. No way. It's impossible to pay such a large sum. Please, forgive me. We're close, aren't we? With tears streaming down his face, Brandon inched closer to me, trying to grab my hand. However, I pushed him away with all my might. Don't think you can get away with consuming people with greed. Suffer for the rest of your life. When I spat these words at him, Brandon burst into tears, snot running down his face. After a while, the lawyer arrived with the police. Watching my husband being dragged away, I felt my heart lighten a little. Looking at the blue sky outside, I felt that my mother-in-law must be happy that I had solved the case. Afterwards, I immediately divorced Brandon. With his arrest, his affair was exposed at his workplace, and both he and his mistress were fired. Brandon is now facing trial. According to the lawyer, he might be behind bars for many years. Even if he gets out, he'll have to pay $50,000 in compensation and $60,000 in debt. He'll spend the rest of his life struggling with debt. On the other hand, I've fully recovered and regained stability in my life. I can now focus on work, and my insurance sales performance is good. Recently, I was headhunted by a foreign company. Moreover, an ex-boyfriend I reunited with at a class reunion offered to help with my career change, and things are going well in that area too. I think all this good fortune might be thanks to my mother-in-law watching over me from heaven. I'm considering donating my mother-in-law's inheritance without touching it, but that should be okay, right?